Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm, and you are watching What If Naruto Was Banished and Awaken Sharingan. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now, wasting no time, let's start the story.
The Taki camp for slaves, a group of bandits and some missing nin from different villages were drinking, laughing, and talking about how they raided a small village and killed men, women, and children in the miles-long, dense jungle inside Kusagakure. As a kind of victory trophy, they had taken women between the ages of 14 and 35 and placed them in cages within the camp. They were sobbing and whimpering because they knew that if they were taken prisoner by bandits and nin went missing, they would be raped and subjected to other horrible treatment. At that moment, the woman was terrified and hoped for a miracle to fall when all of the bandits and missing nin mentioned stood up and came toward the cages like hunting animals with bottles of sake swinging around. As some women ducked their heads in terror, one bandit grinned malevolently and remarked, "Ha ha ha, look at them crying and whimpering." Another bandit smirked as he stepped forward, "Ha ha ha, it just makes it all the more fun." A missing nin wearing a slashed Iwagakure headband said, "Well, then, why are we waiting?" he asked, opening a cage and removing a woman who appeared to be in her 20s. She screamed and kicked the entire time, but was slapped by the missing nin with everyone else joining in on his crazed laughter at the end. He said, "Shut it, bitch, soon you'll be screaming for a different reason." A voice cried out through the forest before anyone could take action. "Raiden. Byakurai. Lightning release. Pale lightning." The woman was able to fall and quickly retreat when a long streak of condensed yellow lightning struck the missing nin in the side of the head, instantly killing him. The lightning burst from behind the trees. Everyone turned to look at a figure that looked like an 18-year-old young man. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall and had blonde, spiky hair with black highlights that stood out everywhere. His hair flowed past his shoulder blades, resembling Madara Uchiha's hairstyle. "You people disgust me, humans like you should never exist." The only imperfection on his tanned face was a spot of dust that appeared to glow in the bright sunlight that streamed through the numerous trees surrounding him. He wore a phoenix-shaped earring on his left ear that hung a little on a very short chain, and his dark onyx eyes showed some warmth, though not as much as they used to, even though he was looking at a number of rapists, murders, and anything else that could be deemed a crime with anger and hatred. His face was frozen in a blank stare as though he were looking at nothing at all. Being ambidextrous, he wore a shuriken and kunai holster strapped to each leg, a pair of baggy black cargo pants with multiple extra pockets, and a steel-toed black combat boot. In addition, he wore a utility belt with scrolls for convenience and multiple pouches. In addition to his regular black t-shirt with an upturned collar covering his neck, he wore a black trench coat without sleeves that had crimson fire licking the bottom, similar to his father's own trench coat because it had no sleeves. The t-shirt only covered his biceps, but he did have on a pair of fingerless gloves that appeared to be ideal for combat because they had metal plating built into them. He had the kanji for Shinku Senko, Crimson Flash, stitched vertically in gold on the back of the trench. His neck was covered by the collar of his trench coat along with another lovely necklace he had gotten from Tsunade Senju. He also wore a stunning silver chain necklace around his neck that contained a replica of a phoenix. Finally, Hirenmaru strapped his utility belt to his left side, showcasing its beauty and ideally positioned for a fast draw. Except for the guard, which is shaped like a 4-pointed bronze star, Hirenmaru appears to be a typical katana. The blade was roughly 1/4 meters long, and the hilt and sheath are both light and dark blue. For obvious reasons, not many people are aware that this was Naruto Uzumaki, or as he is actually known, Naruto Uchiha Namikaze. Unbeknownst to many, he was the son of Uchiha Makoto and Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage. Since the head of the Uchiha family was never in love with the woman, rather, she was a political wife who was coerced into marriage, many people were unaware that Fugaku Uchiha's wife had an affair with the Yondaime. Despite this, she had to remain married in order to shield her kids from the Uchiha clan and those who would hurt her sons. He only knew all of this because he had met Itachi while traveling. Initially, he believed he was there to kidnap him for Akatsuki. Itachi's revelation of the truth about everything, which opened Naruto's world to a world of possibilities and impending sadness, came as a huge shock. The council would have shit themselves if anyone had ever looked up Naruto's family history. Ironically, Sasuke was welcomed back into the village with open arms after killing Itachi, as if he had been walking in the forest for a few years. However, he was never aware of Sasuke's motivation for returning to Konoha, and to be honest, he didn't care. All of this was only known to Naruto because he had stayed in touch with Jiraiya, who, unbelievably, had gone behind the council's back and given him some training. Nevertheless, he wasn't alone. He had many senses for which he would always be thankful, but Jiraiya was the one who taught him everything he knew and was always there for him. She even took him to Mount Myobokuzen to learn the sage arts. He enjoyed learning about that, especially in such a serene setting. After gaining control over the 5 primary elements and, with enough training, sub-elements, Naruto realized that he could finally thank the Kyuubi for giving him these abilities. In order to broaden his jutsu repertoire for all the various scenarios that might arise during a battle, he used that knowledge to go and learn as many jutsu as he could. Combining his Rasengan with elements was another project he worked on, and he had to admit that it was the most difficult thing he had ever had to do. After meeting his fellow Jinchuriki in Kumogakure, who had assisted him with his training secrets up in the mountains away from people's way, Naruto had traveled there to learn everything he could about Raiden in order to master it more quickly. He had to admit that he considered Killer B, the Jinchuriki of the Hachibi no Kyogyu, to be among the greatest sensei ever. Despite his bad rapping, he managed to get along with the dark-skinned man because he always taught him what he needed and made sure he understood everything so he didn't miss anything. Since he was a stranger to her, Yugito ni, the Jinchuriki of the Nibi no Bakaneko, was initially a little aloof toward him. However, after some convincing from Killer B, she began to speak to him more slowly and eventually became friends. Since Raiden and Kaden were her elements, she had taught him a little about them, and she was grateful that he also assisted her in other areas. Killer B had introduced him to his 3 students while they were training together. Although he thought Karui was a beautiful woman, he had discovered that she was incredibly tough, something he has realized about all kunoichi he encounters. She also resembled the previous version of him in that she was always happy, impetuous, and impulsive. Like her teammate, Samui was also a stunning woman. However, he had observed that she frequently experienced back pain, and given that her breasts were as large as Tsunade's, he wasn't shocked. He also began massaging her on a regular basis. Out of the 3 students, Omoi was the only one who was male. He was easy to get along with and somewhat resembled Shikamaru, but he was more laid back rather than lazy. One of his amusing traits was his tendency to exaggerate events, which led to arguments with Karui. He had said goodbye to everyone and promised to see them again as he was leaving, but what really startled him was when Karui unexpectedly grabbed him and kissed him, leaving Naruto bewildered. As they specialize in that element, he had ultimately found himself in Kirigakure to study Suiden Jutsu. He had met the Mizukage there and found her to be quite flirtatious, which he didn't mind because of her attractiveness. But even though he really wanted to, he had told her that nothing could happen. She was disappointed, but she understood, and that didn't stop her from giving him a hard time. He soon found himself in Sanagakure, where he investigated Futon's manipulation because he was aware that all of the elemental masters came from the large village Gaara, and Tamari, who felt obligated to the blonde young man for rescuing Gaara from the darkness, helped him advance in his art. Before he took him to Mount Myobokuzan to learn the sage arts and hone his existing jutsu, Jiraiya had appeared sometime in the 3rd year. He had gained a great deal of knowledge and strength from the toads while he was there. In addition, he had encountered numerous other shinobi who assisted him with his elemental training throughout the nations. Some of them had initially opposed him, but he was able to win them over with ease by using his charms. When he turned 17, he believed the Kyuubi had told him that the fox was dying because Naruto had nearly used up all of his chakra more quickly than the seal had intended. He had given Naruto the new Kyuubi no Kitsune as a parting name. Even though he no longer had the fox, he was still able to undergo the changes he would when the Kyuubi was inside of him. However, this time, the chakra worked in his favor rather than against him. However, because it was a very powerful chakra to grasp and hold for an extended period of time, it was still difficult to maintain constantly. Naruto had learned about the wonders of Uchiha, which was the one change in him that was absolutely apparent and that made Jiraiya so proud that he sobbed. Finally, it was time for him to come out once more. The newcomer was laughed at by a visibly inebriated bandit while the missing nin were becoming a little alarmed at the sight of the famous Shinku Senko. She said, laughing more than the bandits, "Ho ho ho, look what we have heard, fellers, some punk kid wanting to play ninja." Naruto shook his head and laughed. His eyes narrowed, and his hand gripped the hilt of Hiranmaru tightly, ready to begin killing. "You guys really need to pay attention to who you're talking to." With a terrified gulp, one of the missing nin turned to his allies while some of the less than smart bandits laughed aloud. His fellow missing nins reluctantly nodded, saying, "We should let it go. This guy is the Shinku Senko, we don't stand a chance." As if this wannabe punk could EV. He began to spit blood indiscriminately, but his words were interrupted when he looked down and saw a silver katana stabbed through his heart from behind. As the blonde shinobi disappeared from his position and appeared behind the bandit, stabbing him in the chest as if it were nothing, the others began to panic. Cold steam began to emanate from Naruto's katana, and then the bandit suddenly turned into an ice statue as ice began to form over his heart. The former bandit cracked all the way from the point of origin at the heart before completely breaking into ice dust and blowing away in the wind as if he had never been there. Naruto twisted Hiranmaru and yanked it out. Screams echoed through the forest as heads rolled. Limbs were lost, and half of those hit by Hiranmaru turned to ice and broke one by one as he cut down the forces. Naruto abruptly turned around and hurled ice from his blade, killing both bandits and shinobi as if they were just flies on the wall. The dead bandits and missing nin who had once opposed the force known as Shinku Senko soon covered the area with icicles and snow fragments, demonstrating to everyone why they should never mess with him. After safely sheathing Hiranmaru, Naruto turned to face the cages, where the women were all staring at them in wonder and blushing slightly at the sight of their hero in action. As he approached them and unlocked every cage, the women rushed to Naruto to express their gratitude, give him hugs, and even give him kisses for saving them from a fate worse than death. Naruto looked at them all and backed away a little. Laughing, he grinned and said, "Why don't I get you all back to your village so you can be with your loved ones?" They all gave enthusiastic nods and had enormous smiles on their faces. A tiny community outside of Takigakure. When Naruto arrived in the village, he discovered that all of the women's loved ones were waiting for him at the gate. They rushed to greet the women and thanked the gods that they had been returned to them before something bad happened. Naruto smiled slightly as he watched the scene, happy that he was able to bring families back together. He was about to turn around and head out when he heard an old voice interrupt him. The male voice says, "Wait a minute, young man." When Naruto turns around, he sees a man who appears to be in his 70s approaching him while crouching slightly and holding an envelope. Naruto smiles and shakes his head when he says, "Wait, please take this money. It's for saving my daughter and everyone's loved one from those horrible bandits and shinobi." He and the villagers looked shocked and incredulous as Naruto explained, "No thanks, old man, keep your money, I didn't do it for that." Naruto shook his head in response to his question. "Are you sure? We were gonna pay for bringing them back. Didn't you do this for money?" "No sir, I just did what I thought is right. Besides, if there's one thing I hate more than anything, it's bandits and missing nin who think they can do whatever the hell they like, and money right now is the least of my worries. Use it for your own purpose," he replied with a grin on his face. After a long moment of blinking at Naruto, the man smiles back. He said, bowing his head in gratitude as the others did the same, "Thank you so much, young man. Oh, where are my manners? My name is Momoji. We are forever in your debt for bringing the women back. We don't know what we would have done if something had happened." Naruto just grinned and laughed. His body began to turn to ice before breaking, leaving no trace of him standing there. "You're welcome, and if you have any more problems with bandits, look me up. Well, it's time for me to go see ya." The Konoha office of the Hokage. As of right now, Tsunade Senju was sitting behind her office, thinking about the most recent news she had received. Akatsuki had been spotted near Takigakure. The only reason she could think of for them being there was because of the Jinchuriki they currently protect, but she knew they couldn't stop the Akatsuki, which is why the Rookie 12 was waiting for orders in front of her, along with Kakashi Hatake, Kurenai Uehi, Maeda Gai, and Asuma Sarutobi. Unexpectedly, Sasuke Uchiha was also present. It seems that after killing Itachi, he realized he had no purpose or home and returned to Konoha, where he was warmly received by the shinobi and civilians alike. However, too many people had begun to respect Naruto for what he had done and were unable to forgive Sasuke. Since Naruto was exiled, the Rookie 12 had undergone significant change. Under Tsunade, Sakura had taken her training more seriously, and her strength and knowledge in the medical field earned her the nickname Mini Tsunade. Because she had never been able to forgive herself, she had also been itching to apologize to Naruto for what she had said to the boy. He was exiled because of Sasuke, which made things worse. This was particularly true when he returned to Konoha and was greeted warmly. Despite being a traitor, she changed into the same basic red top she had been wearing, along with black gloves, black high-heeled boots, black shorts, a short skirt that looked like a pink apron, and pink elbow protectors above her medical pouch. Sakura now carries a Chunin's Tanto. The color of her forehead protector has also changed to red. To everyone's surprise, Ino had undergone a significant transformation after confessing to Naruto. She had become more dedicated to her training and had learned the majority of her family's jutsu in addition to a variety of elemental jutsu that had been very helpful to her in missions. She could now see why Naruto was so devoted to jutsu. Shikamaru was the only one who wasn't surprised by her transformation because he understood how the blondes felt for one another and that Ino would eventually confess and begin to commit. He didn't anticipate Naruto being exiled. However, it was beneficial in that it appeared to inspire Ino even more. Ino had taken off the bandages that she had been wearing around her waist, exposing her stomach, and had put fishnet over her knees and fabric armwear on her elbows. And now, like Sakura, Ino has a Chunin's Tanto, which she wears over her medical pouch. Other than training harder, Shikamaru hadn't really changed all that much. Perhaps this was because he wanted to help Naruto in the future because he was aware of the risks the blonde faced, or perhaps it was because he realized how dangerous missions could be if they weren't well prepared. something he had learned on his most recent mission with Naruto. The height of Shikamaru has increased significantly, although his headband is still in the same spot. He has also changed his costume, wearing a different undershirt and pants and switching from rings to studs for his earrings since he first became a Chunin. Shikamaru has worn a flak jacket and been armed with a Chunin's tanto. Other than deciding to take his training more seriously after being beaten to within an inch of his life during the retrieval mission by his family's pills, Choji hadn't changed much either. He had never had to use them again like the rest of his clan. Choji has a much rounder body than most people, brown hair, and swirl marks on his cheeks. He wears a red top, just like his father, with arm, leg, and torso armor. The obligatory kanji for eat is displayed on the front of his chest armor. He now has much longer brown hair, switched from rings to studs for his earrings, and appears less fat and more muscular, exactly as he has always described himself, big-boned. Since Naruto's exile, Kiba has also undergone significant change. Rather than being a loudmouth, he has become more composed and is better able to fight now that he doesn't lose his temper easily. Sharp black eyes with vertical slit-like pupils, noticeable canine teeth, untidy brown hair, and nails that he can transform into claws are all features of this man. His cheeks are also marked with the Inuzuka clan's characteristic red fangs. He changed into a form-fitting black jacket and pants, black sandals, and a black forehead protector. Like all Aburame, Shino was the same in that he didn't talk to people much. In fact, he liked it that way because it was much more calming. Shino, who had kind of admired Naruto years before because he always felt like he was like himself in terms of being an outcast, didn't like how the boy was banished. Shino, who has pale skin and dark bushy brown hair, looks even more enigmatic with his jacket dangling down to his knees, a hood that further blocks his face, and a satchel on his back. However, Hinata had changed the most. She no longer stammered, was arguably the most self-assured person there, and was among the strongest kunoichi since the banishment. She had dedicated herself to training constantly, even to the point where her father began to worry about her, which was unusual. Her hair had grown to her waist, and she wore navy pants, black sandals, and a white lavender jacket. The cloth has turned black, but she still wears her forehead protector around her neck. Since she didn't know Naruto well, it didn't really affect her, at least not as much as it did the others. So Tenten hadn't changed much. She was wearing red pants instead of green and a white blouse instead of the pink one she had been wearing. Everything still alludes to Chinese culture. Even though she is now wearing black fingerless gloves when fighting, she uses a huge tool summoning scroll that she carries on her back. Given that Naruto, like Lee, was the deadliest of their year, Lee had appeared depressed as he looked up to him and saw him as a brother of sorts. When he heard that Naruto was being banished, he couldn't help but feel that it was very unyouthful, which caused him to train twice as hard, much to the chagrin of his teammates. In addition to being significantly taller now, Lee wore the same outfit as many other shinobi, with the exception of a vest top. Neji had begun to bring up Fate a little more after he realized that, despite Sasuke's triumphant return, Fate had stepped in and prevented Naruto from fulfilling his ambition of becoming Hokage by banishing him. Neji left the bandages behind. He now dons traditional white and black Hyuga robes in place of his usual tan jacket and shorts. This might have been done to demonstrate his increased affinity for his clan as well as to facilitate his attacks. Neji is frequently spotted carrying a sizable drawstring bag that is tan and black over his shoulder. And then there was Sasuke. He had changed a little, but he was still conceited about the Uchiha clan and their power, and it only got worse with his new Mangekyo Sharingan. Although he was a little hesitant because not many people wanted to be close to him, he was more talkative, less reclusive, and more gregarious. He was shocked to learn that Naruto had banished him upon his return, but he knew in his heart that the choice would ultimately come back to haunt him and the villagers. He was now 6 feet tall, and his appearance had changed significantly over the years. He wore a white long-sleeved shirt with a smaller version of the Uchiha crest on the collar, and his hair was a little longer, falling over his eyes slightly. He was dressed in black pants and had a blue cloth draped from his knees to the middle of his stomach. In addition, he had a purple rope tied in a bow around his waist. Tsunade's gaze was solemn as she looked up. "I've called you all here for a very special mission that needs each and every one of you." At that, Kakashi appeared to raise an eyebrow with everyone else nodding in agreement. He questioned, "A mission that needs us all, what could be so important?" With a sigh, Tsunade folded her hands in front of her face. They all tensed up and gasped, thinking and hoping that Naruto was somehow involved, but that one word was enough to silence any remarks that had been on their lips. Akatsuki. They had all been informed of Naruto's affiliation with the group and had trained as hard as they could to fight with him. He was still a comrade whether he was exiled or not. Sakura gazed at Tsunade solemnly while holding onto the side of her skirt with her hands. She wanted to know what they would be dealing with, so she asked, "What of Akatsuki?" Akatsuki had been sighted close to Takigakure. At first I didn't see what they were after from there, until I realized they currently have a kunoichi there that goes by the name of Fu, the Jinchuriki of the Nanabi no Kabutomushi, she said, and everyone's eyes widened. Neji inquired inquisitively, just like Naruto? Yes, exactly like him, only we have no information on her. The only thing we can do for now is help Taki to protect Fu and stop Akatsuki from abducting her at all cost, she said. Asuma, smoking a cigarette, inquired, do we know what member or Akatsuki was sighted? Tsunade shook her head and sighed. Unfortunately we don't have a clue. The only thing that can honestly be done is be prepared for anything that may come at you. Wanting a good fight, Sasuke asked, when do we leave? They all nodded and were ready to depart when Tsunade interrupted, saying, as soon as possible. I want you all to go home and pack whatever you will need for this mission. Kakashi, stay a minute. Kakashi nodded to her while remaining behind, raising his eyebrows. After everyone had left, Kakashi spoke while looking up at Tsunade. You wanted me alone, Tsunade-sama? Tsunade nodded and glanced at the wall, which began to shimmer slowly before Jiraiya with his arms folded was revealed. Her voice was hopeful as she asked, did he get it? Jiraiya smiled slightly as he glanced at Tsunade. Yes, I don't know if he read it yet, all we have to do is wait and hope. Tsunade gave a small smile. Her voice could have been misinterpreted as a whisper as she said, I just hope he can forgive me. Jiraiya laughed. He made her feel a little better by saying, believe me, I doubt he would blame you whatsoever. Kakashi sighed and asked after glancing back between the two. Both Sannin turned to face him and had the grace to appear embarrassed that they had forgotten about him. What are you two talking about? Tsunade said simply, Naruto. Kakashi appeared to be very perplexed. I don't understand, what about him? Tsunade merely gave a small laugh. She told Kakashi, who stood stunned that his former pupil would or might be returning, I have requested that Naruto comes back in a letter that I had Jiraiya give to him. I can't explain much, but on this mission there may be a chance you meet him. If so, find out his answer and go from there. He asked, glancing at Jiraiya. Have you been keeping in contact all these years with him? Grinning, Jiraiya moved away from the wall to join Tsunade. Yep. With him still having the Toad contract, I was able to meet up with him multiple times. Kakashi turned to Tsunade and nodded briefly. He raised an eyebrow and said, what makes you so sure we may meet with Naruto? Akatsuki, said Jiraiya. Naruto is hunting the Akatsuki down one by one. If he knows one has been sighted, he will be there, to kill them and save his fellow Jinchuriki. When Kakashi saw what Naruto was doing, his eyes widened. He questioned, he's hunting them. But that's suicide. Just how strong is Naruto? And was a little scared of the response when Jiraiya winced, as though recalling a memory from the past. Kakashi's lone eye widened in surprise as he explained, he has been able to defeat me the last couple of times we had a real fight to test his abilities. Since he couldn't tell anyone else, he said, I see, I take it this is just between us three for now. Knowing that everyone wanted to see him and be able to assist him with his problems, Tsunade nodded sadly with a little laugh at the end. She said, unfortunately that is correct. You won't have to treat Naruto as an enemy. He has no animosity towards us, which honestly surprises me, but I guess he wouldn't be the hero if he did. The other two smiled. Kakashi nodded and walked toward the exit. He smiled as he walked out of the room, saying, understood. I guess I'll go get prepared, and I hope he comes back as well, Tsunade-sama. Tsunade leaned back in her chair and gazed solemnly at Jiraiya after Kakashi had left. Will he ever forgive us for what we have done? Jiraiya grinned pitifully, sympathizing with her suffering. With an evil grin, he said, you shouldn't worry. I doubt Naruto would ever blame you for what you were forced to do. He isn't a knucklehead anymore. He is a very smart young man, and if anything, it's the council who should be afraid. Tsunade grinned a little, hoping he was. Her voice was anxious as she said, well, we better just wait to see if he comes back, and then, while I can, she thought to herself, I can tell you how I truly feel. Later on in the day, the Takigakure Fu, the Jinchuriki of the Nanabi no Kabutomushi, was a kunoichi who stood in an open field facing her opponent with a nervous expression on her face. Fu had pink eyes and green hair that was clipped. She wore her Takigakure forehead protector on her arm like Shikamaru, and her ninja attire included a fishnet waistband, white armlets, and a high white shirt on her back. Fu also held a cylindrical red object. However, her opponent, Kisame Hoshigaki, was a member of the renowned Akatsuki organization. He was a tall, powerful shinobi who had a characteristic shark-like appearance, complete with pale blue skin, small white eyes, gill-like facial structures, and sharp triangular teeth like Itachi. Kisame also has dark purple nails. Kisame is dressed similarly to his colleague Zabuza Momochi, wearing an Akatsuki cloak underneath his Akatsuki ring, which features the kanji for south, Nan, is on his left ring finger. With a savage grin that exposed his pointed teeth, Kisame exclaimed, "Come on girlie, just come peacefully, otherwise my Samahata will be getting some lovely chakra to eat from you." Although she was strong, Fu wasn't strong enough to defeat someone of this caliber, so she scowled a little as she glanced at her opponent. "He wants Nanabi, though, so I can't let him have her. I have to do everything in my power, even if it means dying." She smirked and said, "You think I'll give up just like that? You really are as dumb as you look." Kisame simply smiled more broadly while holding Samahata. He swung Samahata around and swung at Fu, who defended herself by raising a kunai with chakra coursing through it. "Well then, I'll just have to shave your legs off first." A crater was created when Samahata was brought down on the kunai, resulting in an explosion. To get a better look at the situation, Fu pushed Kisame away from her and flipped backwards. As she looked ahead, she saw Kisame standing in the freshly formed crater, his Samahata dangling on his shoulder, staring at her with his fish-like eyes. As bugs began to emerge from beneath her armbands and fly around her, Fu held her arms out, raising Kisami's eyebrow. "With having the Nanabi no Kabutomushi sealed within me, it gives me the abilities to control bugs, much like the Aburame of Konoha do." When he called out, she threw out her arms, and what appeared to be thousands of insects flew at Kisame at a startling rate, flipping through hand seals. Suiten. Suikodan no Jutsu. Water release. Water shark missile technique. He cut through the bugs on his way to Fu by opening his mouth and letting a lot of water shoot out of it before assuming the spectral shape of a shark. Fu put her hands in a seal and yelled as she saw the danger approaching when the water shark struck the shield, causing a slight tremor in the ground. All of her bugs suddenly flew towards her and wrapped around her to form a dome-shaped shield that protected her. This is known as Mushi Kame no Jutsu, insect jar technique. Alongside the Konoha team at the intersection of Takigakure and Hai no Kuni. As they all leapt through the trees, Shino said, "We are close." This made everyone turn to face him. Tenten's eyebrows went up as he asked, "How do you know?" "I can sense bugs being used along with someone that holds a large amount of chakra," he clarified. Receiving nods from his fellow Jonin, Asuma concluded, the bugs must be a side effect of having the Nanabi no Kabutomushi sealed within her, making her like an Aburame. Kiba began to sniff, then wrinkled his nose in disgust. "Too, I smell a lot of blood and something that makes me think of fish, as though this person had killed all his life." Before his lone eye widened, Kakashi put his hand under his chin and thought, "If that's the case, we need to hurry up." Out of Akatsuki, the only one who sounds like that is Kisame Hoshigaki. "What makes him so dangerous?" Ino asked, looking perplexed. Kisame Hoshigaki was a former member of the Kiri no Shinobugatana Nananan Shu. His chakra reserves could rival a Biju, making him a powerhouse, and his sword Samahata is a truly monstrous thing. If there is anyone in Akatsuki who is a real danger, it is him, Kakashi clarified, and everyone's eyes widened. "All those years ago when I was utterly defeated by Itachi in a hotel, I saw Kisame ready to take Naruto, and if it hadn't been for Jiraiya, they may have actually captured him," Sasuke said, causing his eyes to widen as well. "Itachi and he were after Naruto. What does that signify, then? Is Kisame aiming for Naruto?" Sakura asked, her expression worried. Knowing that it might be true, Kurenai sighed sorrowfully and said, "It might be possible, but with Itachi dead, he wouldn't have a partner anymore. His orders may have changed." Before the shot was fired, Guy received nods from everyone around him and said gravely, "We should hurry then, we have no idea what we'll be getting into." Alongside Naruto, the fact that Naruto was flying through the trees at full speed and had just sensed demonic chakra, fortunately, he wasn't too far away, made him even more alarmed. He felt a familiar and incredibly high level of chakra. He was certain that Akatsuki was attacking Takigakure because of their Jinchuriki. Fortunately, he had visited the area previously and knew Shibuki, the village leader, and over the years, he discovered that the village viewed him as a hero, just like other villages he had rescued. Shaking his head from his thoughts, he narrowed his eyes ahead of him, concentrating on his mission to save his fellow Jinchuriki. He couldn't help but feel proud of himself because he was being regarded as a hero in other countries, but he couldn't even get that kind of respect in his own village. His tone was laced with venom as he stated, "Akatsuki's going to be one more member down when I'm through with them." With Kisame and Fu, as Fu held out her hand and fired the bugs at Kisame, who continued to ward them off with his big sword. Growing irritated as more and more bugs approached him, the bugs scattered around her. Mashidama in Hajutsu. Secret technique. Insect sphere. She yelled as all of the insects sucked chakra from Kisami's body, covering his whole body. She was unaware that Kisame had a lot of chakra, though. Before it exploded in water, water began to leak out of the bugs, indicating that it was a Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. She was shocked to learn that he had created a clone, saying, "It must have been when I was protected by my bugs, the cunning bastard, water clone technique." She was startled out of her reverie by a blow to her head that was so powerful that she flew to the ground. Getting cut in the process, she put her hand on the ground, slowed down, and twisted to get to her feet, glaring at Kisame, who was grinning, and saw that Samahada's wrapping had come off at the top, exposing blue scales. She sighed in relief as she looked down at her side and saw that her clothes were ripped and that her skin was ripped by a large gash. Red chakra began to bubble around the area, healing her skin almost immediately. A huge water dragon materialized in front of Kisame and shot at Fu, who was unprepared for the jutsu. Fortunately for her, Kami was by her side as a voice called out, "Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu. Water release. Water dragon bullet technique." Kisame stabbed the ground, placing Samahada there as he flipped through hand seals. Doden. Doryuheki. Earth-style wall. Earth release. As the wall lowered, Fu saw something she would never have imagined seeing. 15 Konoha shinobi lined up in front of her. The wall was made of solid earth and rose up in front of her to protect her from the power of the water dragon that slammed into it, splashing water all around and even getting Fu. She said the first thing that sprang to mind after she snapped out of her shock. "Who are you people?" Glancing back, Kakashi grinned and said, as if it were inconsequential, "The Hokage was warned about sighting of Akatsuki in the area, and we are here to help you out." "Why would you lend me a hand?" Wondering what their motivation was, she asked sourly. Asuma smiled sorrowfully and said, "Let's just say we owe it to an old friend." "Who?" she inquired, still wary of them. Kurenai's response caused the Jinchuriki's eyes to enlarge. "Naruto Uzumaki. The Takigakure hero?" she asked in utter shock, causing the others to stare at her in astonishment at what she had called him. They were unaware that this was how the village perceived them, which further depressed them over what their village had done to him. "Yes, him," Neji said, almost solemnly. "He was also a Jinchuriki like you." The young girl wondered what had happened to the hero of her village. As he prepared to use a shunshin to escape, Kisame looked at the group and realized he was in real trouble. He may be strong and self-assured, but he wasn't foolish. Sure, he might take a few of them out, but at what cost? This could be trouble. I best be going now. Mokuton. Iso Jubaku. Wood release. Curse binding nest. Wooden planks sprang from the earth and wrapped themselves around Kisami's arms and legs, securing him in place and preventing him from moving. The Konoha shinobi heard a voice that sounded very familiar. "You're not going anywhere, fish face." Everyone turned to watch Naruto kneel on the ground, his palm flat on the ground, his eyes narrowed as he stared at Kisame. "Naruto?" Fu looked shocked at finally being able to see the hero of her village and another Jinchuriki, while Kakashi questioned whether what he saw was real as everyone's eyes widened at how much he had changed. Naruto gave Kakashi a slight smile and rose to his full height, which, ironically, made him taller than most people there than he had been as a midget. He laughed and said, "It's good to see you, Kakashi-sensei, it's been too long." Kisame, who was acting unrestrained, said, "Ah, the Kyuubi kid is here. Last time I saw you, you were a scrawny little bastard." His grin grew larger as he looked down at the wood. "So you can use the Mokuton, huh?" They stared at Naruto in disbelief as he said that. Seeing the wood around Kisame begin to crack, Naruto shrugged his shoulders and said, "It isn't that hard to use really. With having the Kyuubi's presence within me, it makes my chakra all the more potent and giving me the ability to recreate sub-elemental chakra, almost like a bloodline." Asuma muttered, "Amazing, like his father, he had always enjoyed jutsu." Kakashi also mumbled in amazement, being able to do that could increase someone's potential immensely. Sasuke was gritting his teeth in annoyance at the Dobi's ability to perform such a feat when he is incapable of doing so, while everyone else was in awe of his ability. How the hell could he get so strong, he asked. Before shouting, Naruto held out his right hand, causing a spark of fire to ignite on its palm. Kaden. Shakaho. Fire release. Shot of red fire. A huge explosion was caused when a red ball of fire blew from his hand and struck Kisame. After the smoke cleared, Kisame was seen wearing a slightly burned cloak and his samahada, which protected him from the assault. He grinned and remarked, "Hee, not bad y'all little brat, but not good enough. Kisame, retreat for now, you had too much of a disadvantage. We will retrieve the two Jinchuriki another time," someone said in his mind before he could take any action. With an evil cackle, Kisame turned abruptly to the splashing water and said, "Well, looks like I've gotta go. I'll see you, Kyuubi boy, some other time." He then sighed and placed Samahada on his back, completely confusing the group. When Naruto saw Kisame gone, he struck the ground with his fist, creating a tiny crater. Damn it. When Kakashi noticed that everyone was okay, he moved closer to Naruto and said, "Naruto?" The blonde turned to face him and stood up, and he said, "Tsunade-sama wanted to know if you were returning or not." This confused the Konoha shinobi. "Sensei Kakashi. What are you saying? I take it that Naruto has been exiled?" Sakura asked in confusion, and Naruto gave her a level stare that made her tense as she recalled her most recent altercation with the young man. Naruto also recalled that. Rewind. When Naruto turned the corner on his way home to pack, he saw Sakura with one of his first crushes, Ino Yamanaka, deciding to be nice. Naruto ran over to say goodbye, since nothing felt more like a kick in the crotch than hearing that everything you've worked so hard for and everything you've lived for was being taken away from you like that. "Hi, Sakura-chan." Naruto chirped at the girl with the pink hair, who appeared irritated and, furious. "What do you want, Naruto?" she replied. Knowing Sakura was contemplating his broken promise, Naruto looked down a little as he realized why she must be upset. "Sakura-chan, I'm sorry that I couldn't bring Sasuke back." He might have anticipated her response, but she gave him the mother of all glares and said, "Sorry? I'm sorry you couldn't fulfill your commitment. I apologize, Naruto, for thinking that a dead last like you would bring Sasuke-kun back." Startled that the girl he believed he had a crush on would say such a thing, Naruto looked up and said, "Sakura-chan, I really tried, but..." "Have you tried? You didn't try. You know you would try to save Sasuke. But why? You were aware of my feelings for him, and I'm sure you assumed that I would accept a date if he were no longer involved." With cold blue eyes that made them uneasy, he glared back, declaring that enough was enough and that he would not handle any more bullshit from the bitch. "I didn't try, because I was holding back out of fear that I might kill your precious Sasuke-kun. I had a hole in my fucking chest. Actually, too. And what do I get in exchange? Every jerk I've encountered has given me a glare, and to make things worse, I just left a meeting where I was told I was exiled and would never be allowed to return to this village. It's you pink-haired bitch, who did nothing but cry. Perhaps the next time you'll do something to fuck yourself in this village," Naruto said with so much anger that Sakura kept taking steps back while all the villagers listening in were wondering if they had pushed him too far. As Naruto walked off, they could have sworn they heard, "I should have killed him instead." Despite what some may think, Ino never hated Naruto. In fact, she admired him. She had a long-standing crush on him before he put on his smiling mask, and it was when he acted like a fool that she went to Sasuke because he reminded her of Naruto. Seeing him like that made her a little horny because she was reminded of Naruto, but then she realized that he was banished for failing a mission. How stupid was that? Hell, he wasn't even the team leader. When Ino turned to face her friend, she was shocked by what she had heard, and her eyes were wide. "Well, you deserved that. Well, I'm going to say bye to Naruto-kun, and maybe something else." She smirked and blushed as she hurried away. Sakura didn't deserve to have the opportunity to apologize because she knew she was a bitch and deserved what Naruto said, but what really perplexed her was what Ino said. She didn't realize what she had lost from her actions until later. "The flashback has ended." He asked why she was telling him now, and she replied, "Because I may never get another chance to tell you the truth again, and I don't want that in the back of my mind all my life wondering, what if, you know?" Naruto grinned when Ino showed up at his door and confessed everything. In response, Naruto planted a kiss on her lips, causing her to widen her eyes and then melt into it, relishing every moment of the unadulterated joy that she knew she would never experience again. Nobody was aware of what Naruto and Ino did that evening, but it made them happy and relieved to finally be able to talk about it. Naruto had left everything behind in the hopes of a better future the following morning. "Tell Tsunade, 1 week, I still have some stuff that needs doing before I plan on doing anything," Naruto said. Turning back to Kakashi with a small smile, he paused as he looked at Fu, who was staring at him in awe. "I should get Fu back to Takigakure and to her brother Shibuki." She went wide-eyed at the realization that he knew who she truly was. After turning to face the other people, Kakashi grinned and nodded in agreement, saying, "Well, it seems like everything is all right here. We should head back now. Tsunade-sama would want to hear everything as soon as possible." Naruto sighed with relief as everyone nodded and gave him one last glance before leaping away. "Thank God. That was getting awkward with everyone staring at me," he muttered to himself. As she approached Naruto, barely reaching his shoulders, Fu glanced up at him and said, "So you're the one who saved my brother and our entire village?" She inquired to make sure this was the correct man. As they began to make their way back to the village, Naruto nodded and laughed, saying, "Yup, although I did have my teammates with me, but I did help Shibuki defeat his former sensei Suin." She bowed and grinned broadly as she said, "Thank you for saving my brother Naruto-san. I was only a genin at the time, but I had heard about everything from him." With a slight smile, Naruto simply waved her away, saying, "It's in my nature to help those who deserve it." Fu smiled and gazed up at him in wonder, then shook her head and said, "Why weren't you with the Konoha shinobi? I thought you were one of them." As night fell, Naruto let out a sorrowful sigh and turned to face the sky. "I was banished from Konoha," he said, causing her to gasp in surprise. "Banned? Why?" she questioned in disbelief. "I had a mission when I was 13 to bring back my teammate who had abandoned us and was heading to Orochimaru to kill Itachi Uchiha in order to gain power. I lost because I was hit in the chest by a Raiden jutsu, and when I returned, the council decided that I was too dangerous to be there because of the Kyuubi, so I was exiled. If I'm being honest with myself, though, I would rather be exiled than trapped in a village where I'm treated like a ticking time bomb or the Kyuubi itself." Even though Fu was well aware of how people can treat you simply because you have a demon in your stomach, she could see that she had it easy because the Kyuubi had killed thousands of innocent people in his hometown. Fu gazed at Naruto in awe of the suffering he must have gone through due to having the Kyuubi sealed inside of him and being betrayed by the village he trusted. After giving Fu a kind grin, Naruto said, "We should get to the village as soon as possible. Your brother is probably worried sick for you." She nodded, and they began to run. The Takigakure, after 5 days, Shibuki, who practically hugged Naruto until he nearly passed out from lack of breath, thanked him profusely for saving her. When he returned with Fu, he simply told him it was his duty and that there was no problem. Before he had to return to Konoha and deal with the council, Shibuki had offered to let him stay for a while so he could rest and organize his belongings. During their time together, Naruto and Fu got to know one another. Naruto told her about his journey and everything he had seen and experienced, and she listened to every word of his stories. To Shibuki's amusement, she quickly discovered that she was falling for the tall shinobi, as evidenced by the numerous activities she appeared to be doing with him. And today was the day he would depart for an indeterminate amount of time. As Naruto stood at the village entrance leading to the outside of the big tree, prepared to return to his former village that had deceived him, he noticed Fu and Shibuki bidding him farewell from behind. Shibuki said, bowing slightly, "Have a safe journey, Naruto-san." With a slight smile, he said, "Thanks, Shibuki-san. I doubt anything will happen though. Konoha's not far from here." He then saw that Fu was acting glum and realized that it was because he was leaving. He had known she had developed feelings for him but didn't want to press her into doing anything, so he had waited to see how things developed. He brought out a 3-pronged kunai from his pouch as he approached her, saying, "If you ever need my help or are in trouble, or if you just want to talk even, throw this at something and I'll be there within a moment's notice, I promise." Fu bowed slightly to Naruto and said, "Thank you, Naruto-kun." She had never seen anything like it before, so she took it quickly in case he declined and took it back. As Shibuki attempted to ignore what was happening to his sister, Naruto laughed and put his hand under her chin to raise her head. Then, leaning slightly, he planted a gentle, sensual kiss on her lips that nearly caused her to pass out. Pulling back, Naruto smiled at Fu's stunned expression and waved to them both before heading out, saying, "That's something to remember me by. Hopefully when I see you again, it can last longer." After Naruto had disappeared, Shibuki turned to face his sister, who was clutching the kunai to her chest, and he laughed, saying in a song-like voice, "Looks like someone's in love." The girl blushed. "Shibuki." As she ran after her brother, who was laughing the entire time, she screamed. Alongside Naruto one day later, knowing there was no rush, Naruto was leaping through the trees at a leisurely pace when he suddenly stopped, landed on a tree branch, and leapt to the ground floor. A soft female chuckle sounded from behind him, and a sharp blade was suddenly at his throat, very nearly killing him. The voice was almost suggestive as it said, "Either you're getting slow, or you wanted to be in this position." The figure turned around when the Naruto with the blade to his throat suddenly poofed. Naruto was leaning against a tree, grinning, and he winked. "Well, we have tried every other position, may as well create a new one, Kagura Enkai." Naruto looked at the woman before him and couldn't help but admire her. Her crimson hair and emerald eyes seemed to sway in mischief, mimicking her personality exactly. She was wearing a slightly altered black battle kimono, which was very revealing, but it would be a huge disadvantage to underestimate her. She was holding a sly-looking scythe with a red blade, a family heirloom that had been passed down from warrior to warrior, and it was because of this weapon that she was known as the Shojuhi Kiho. With a small laugh, Kagura laid her scythe on her back and walked over to Naruto. She grabbed his face and pulled him into a passionate, hungry kiss, which they both groaned into as though they hadn't shared a kiss in a long time. After twisting her so that she was against the tree, Naruto began kissing her neck, sending shivers down her spine as she raised her right leg, nearly encircling his waist as though to invite him inside. In what sounded like an apologetic voice, Naruto broke the kisses and turned to face Kagura, who was looking back at his half-lidded emerald eyes that seemed to shine with love. Love for him, something he would never have imagined in his entire life. Sorry, but we can't do that here. The woman let out a disappointed moan. Are you certain? I mean, no one is here, we could fuck all night and not be disturbed, she said, hoping he would. Sorry, but we have to be at Konoha by tomorrow. I promised Tsunade I would help her, and you know me, Naruto said, laughing and kissing her once more. Kagura laughed and gave him a gentle pat on the whiskered cheeks, which caused him to growl. You and your promises, she said softly. Are you going to entice her as well? She winked and smirked as she spoke. I don't seduce people, they flock to me, and besides I'm only interested in a few women I've met over time. It's up to Tsunade if she wanted or not, Naruto said. Laughing and shaking his head he pulled her closer so he could whisper in her ear while his hot breath made her shiver. You'll always be my number one, no matter what. He gave her ass a little squeeze, causing her to groan with pleasure. With a faint smile on her face, she whispered, tease, into his shoulder before stepping back. With a laugh, Naruto patted his rustling garments and turned back to face Kagura. So, what have you found out? Taking charge of her hormones, Kagura said, Orochimaru's been gathering more and more missing nin to his forces. Luckily, they seem more like cannon fodder. It shouldn't be long now until the Habiteme finally strikes, she said with an air of seriousness. Naruto sighed and nodded. Luckily we'll be there to stop him from following through with his conquest against Konoha. In addition, Kagura sighed, detesting Orochimaru for all the trouble he had caused knowing his past with a certain Uchiha. She asked cautiously, do you think Sasuke will rejoin him? There must be some reason he left the Teme alive before he went after Itachi. Naruto gave a non-committal shrug. Honestly I don't know, while I think it's strange he left him alive, either he couldn't defeat him or he needed him for something, but if he does join with Orochimaru, this time I won't let him survive, he said with a clenched fist. In order to help Naruto relax a little, Kagura took hold of his hand and intertwined their fingers smirking. She remarked, you're not alone this time, Narukoi, and with us too, no one can stop us. Before he spoke, Naruto briefly tightened his hold on Kagura's hand as though to express gratitude. Kagura nodded as they began to jump through the trees, saying, well, we should head to Konoha to help Tsunade out. I'll make damn sure that you never have to fight alone again, Narukoi. Kagura thought this while sporting a smirk that made Naruto uneasy. She looks sexy like that, but that smirk is never a good sign. Hello. No Kuni North Gates, Konoha the following day. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he gazed at the village gates. It had been 6 years since he had been banished, and he still felt a twinge of resentment toward those who had mistreated him during that time. Kagura, who had been by his side, also narrowed her eyes at the treatment she had received. Love. Even though Tsunade had asked for his assistance and even went so far as to lift his banishment, the council's enthusiastic approval was even more unexpected. He was aware of the reason for his summons. Akatsuki were still present and incredibly powerful. The fact that Orochimaru was also on the loose and intended to murder and destroy Konoha made matters worse. As he began to make his way to the desk, he was thrilled to see Tsunade and Shikamaru again because they were best friends. Kiba was also a best friend with a rivalry since he no longer believed in fate. The Hyuga had become more gregarious with others, and he had also become good friends with Neji following the Chunin exam. Then there was Ino, and he didn't know what to do with her. He had his eye on other women in the village, but he didn't know if they had found someone or anything because they had been gone for so long. As Naruto approached the gate, he saw 2 guards lounging in the gate booth. 2 of the people who saw him for him and not the fox were Katetsu and Izumo, who were friends of Naruto and the cunning Chunin. The guards were so shocked to see someone come back from the dead that they nearly fainted when they saw him. Why Yondaime-sama? Choked Izumo that made Naruto groan. He grinned and said, geez, I know I look like my dad, but I'm sorry to upset you. It's me, Naruto. When Naruto returned to the village, they were so shocked that they did faint. This time he stepped over them and continued on his joyous journey to the Hokage Tower after saying, didn't expect that, oh well. As Naruto simply stepped over the guards, Kagura's perspiration fell, but she shrugged her shoulders and followed him because she didn't want to get lost in a village. The last time she got lost in a village, she ended up using her scythe to destroy part of it until she was expelled. As he walked, Naruto noticed that everyone was staring at him. Women were blushing and pointing, and men were glaring at him because they could see how lustfully their wives and girlfriends were staring at him. Yondaime-sama has returned. He's back for redemption against us. Our hero is back. Wow, he's so handsome. I wonder if he'll have my children. At the final remark, Naruto moaned. Everywhere else I go, it's the same, Tower of Hokage. Tsunade's Senju had a fairly good idea of why they were here, and she was currently sitting behind her desk reviewing reports of recent sightings of Akatsuki in Fire Country. She hadn't changed at all over the years. She was still the irritable person who would nod off and get wasted, though this was becoming less frequent. Jiraiya had given her tidbits of information about her Naruto, but every time she thought about him and his activities over the years, her desire to see him grew. Shizune was the only one who knew that she had developed a fondness for the blonde that went beyond friendship. She was scared to confess this since he was too young for her, but it didn't stop the dreams from coming. She was startled out of her reverie by a knock on the door, but she was perplexed because no teams were out and no missions were prepared, so the only explanation must be. With a glimmer of hope, she said, "Come on." Tsunade had to control her emotions and suppress a drool as she walked through the door of what some might refer to as a god among men. All of her fantasies and dreams were blown away when she finally recognized the man. Carefully, she said, "Naruto?" Naruto laughed and took a step forward as Tsunade's eyes widened to enormous saucers. He smiled softly and said, "Yep, it's me. I got your message a week ago." Tsunade practically jumped over the desk to embrace the blonde, and she loved every second of it. The man was taller than her and had a lot of muscle. Naruto put his arms around the woman and gave her a tight hug, relishing the moment of seeing Tsunade again. However, he was cut off when he heard someone sniffing, and upon looking down, he saw that Tsunade had a few tears in her eyes. He asked while holding her cheek and using his thumb to wipe them away, "What's wrong?" Softly, she clung to him, saying, "I'm sorry, so sorry for banishing you." Wiping away the tears, Naruto took a step back and smiled. She felt a little better after he said, "It wasn't your fault. And besides, I think it was for the best." However, as soon as she saw the red-headed woman, the room became cold, and Naruto couldn't help but gulp. Tsunade's eyes narrowed as she asked, "Who are you?" With a sly smile, Kagura approached Naruto from behind and gave him a hug. When Tsunade realized what she had said, her eyes widened. "I'm one of Naruto's lovers and future wife." Her voice was shaken as she asked, "One of Naruto's lovers?" Naruto tried to defuse the situation by laughing and waving a hand as Kagura winked at her, making her blush a little at the possible ramifications of that conversation. He said, "Well, I need to restart my clan, and as you know, I'm able to have multiple wives to rebuild it, but we'll talk about that later anyway." After Naruto and Kagura pulled chairs up to the desk and sat down, Tsunade went around her desk and Naruto began, "I discovered my bloodline." When Tsunade heard that, she was shocked because she had never thought he would be able to unlock it because of the Kyuubi inside of him. How? Kagura smiled as Naruto laughed at her facial expressions. "I had a seal placed on me. I don't know how it was put on or when, but it was halting my improvements. It slowed down my reaction time and how fast I learned stuff. Technically, it was stumping my growth. However, Kyuubi informed me of it once I left the village. I asked him if he could get rid of it, which he did by pouring his demonic chakra into it, completely vaporizing it. With that gone, it sent me all of the knowledge, power, the lot that I should have received was transferred to me, and it was some time later I was attacked where I unlocked my bloodline. I was shocked to find out what it was though." For reasons she didn't want to know, Tsunade sat there appalled that someone had planned to severely stunt his growth and cut off his lineage. Tsunade shook her head and sighed, "Only you could go through all that." Naruto grinned when she lowered her head and began to cry a little. He realized his poor choice of words and walked over to give her a hug. "I tend to go through a lot." Tsunade simply sighed and put her arms around the blonde again, but just as she was about to release them, a voice said, "Stop crying, I never blamed you, I knew you didn't want anything to do with it." A voice from the window said, "If I didn't know any better, I'd say you two were lovers." The two turned to see Jiraiya smiling twistedly. Naruto interrupted Tsunade as she was about to respond, "Jealous?" he asked, grinning, making Tsunade flush scarlet and Jiraiya gape, who was not prepared for that reaction. Kagura laughed at Jiraiya's face, but if that's how he responded to Naruto's words, wait until later. He smirked dangerously, frightening the old man, and said, "Well, if it isn't the perverted old man." As he watched Kagura move her fingers up and down her side as though getting ready for something, he said a little uneasily, "Ah, Kagura-chan, so nice to see you again." After breaking the embrace, Tsunade returned to her desk and took a seat. Tsunade asked Naruto, "Anyway, you know why I requested you be brought here?" And he nodded. "Yep, Akatsuki and Otto. I think the letter said. I hear the two are becoming powerful. There are also rumors that they may try and recruit more missing nin or make an alliance with other countries." Before Jiraiya spoke, the two Sannin nodded in agreement. "That's why you're here. The council agreed with us that right now, we need your help should things get out of control, but first we need to test you, and with Kagura here as well. You two are like an army yourselves," he said with a proud grin. Naruto nodded. He emphasized the who in his statement, saying, "Okay, but don't expect me to be the old me against the council. They will learn just who they banished all those years ago." He was telling them everything. Tsunade laughed and responded, "Before that, we need to evaluate your skills before you were hired as a mercenary like you wanted. Is there anyone you would like to challenge to prove you strength?" Naruto leaned back in his chair and considered all the people he knew he wanted to appear, but only one, a member of his clan, came to mind. This person had destroyed his life and stolen everything he asked. Glaring at Tsunade with a cunning smile that well woke her up a little, causing her thoughts to wander as the three of them laughed at his scheme, he inquired, "What's Sasuke Uchiha doing lately? I want to see what my cousin is capable of nowadays." Tower of Hokage, the office of Tsunade. Jiraiya rubbed his chin and murmured, "Sasuke huh?" However, Tsunade appeared concerned. He laughed as she half-joked, "Are you sure? I don't need for one of you to die? Don't worry, he's probably stronger than most shinobi here, and there's a lot to tell him about me. Some stuff even you two don't know," he laughed. At that, Jiraiya arched an eyebrow, "And what don't we know?" Sasuke's real parents. That made both Sanin wide-eyed. Tsunade asked, "His parents were Makoto Uchiha and Fugaku Uchiha, aren't they?" "Nope, they are not his biological parents," Jiraiya cried out, "but you said he was your cousin." Naruto spat out his name as though he had consumed something poisonous, "And he is. Listen, I'll explain when I'm fighting Sasuke. I'd rather not have to repeat everything. Oh, and if you want, have everyone from the Rookie 12 and their senseis show up, especially Hitaki." Naruto's pronunciation of Kakashi's name made both Sanin wince, and it was impossible to hold the young man responsible for the way he said it. While Naruto nodded, Kagura added, "There's also information about Orochimaru you may need." Tsunade asked, glancing at the red-headed person, "What information?" "Orochimaru has been building his forces rapidly with each growing day. We fear he may strike at any time, and we also fear he may actually succeed," Naruto stated to them. "He is recruiting missing nin from all over. Most likely he will give them the cursed seal, making them even more formidable and tougher to kill," Kagura replied. Jiraiya sighed and remarked, "I see, he may become a troublesome person soon then." Naruto smiled and said, "Don't worry, we'll help Konoha fight Orochimaru." Tsunade smiled slightly and said, "Very well, thank you. Oh, and be at training ground 7 in 2 hours. Naruto stood up and stretched, glaring at Tsunade. Kagura also stood up and waved to them as they went, and he said, "Sure, I want to take a look around anyway." Tsunade turned to Jiraiya now that the two Sanin were by themselves. "How strong is he?" Jiraiya sighed. "This was to be expected. He can beat me in my sage mode, that's a fact. Also he has his own secrets. Don't forget I only seen him for a maximum of 2 years. For the other years I have no idea what he did. For all I know he's the strongest shinobi out there." The toads were fascinated by him when he achieved his sage mode. However, he had mastered it to levels I could only wish for. It took her a while to process the information because her curiosity was being stoked by the knowledge that Naruto had been absent from the world for a considerable amount of time. Furthermore, Naruto's ability to defeat Jiraiya in his sage mode was an accomplishment in and of itself. Even she was aware of how powerful that was. Jiraiya laughed when she said, "Well, we're just going to have to wait until we see the match. What of the Kagura girl?" He met her close to Kirigakure. At first she thought he was a hunter nin out for her head and attacked him. "I don't know the full story as I wasn't there, but he managed to beat her." She then decided to work with him where they traveled together and eventually feel in love with each. How someone like her fell for a guy like him, I'll never understand. What I do know is that Naruto is legible to the Clan Restoration Act, allowing him to have multiple wives. He has already found some possible wives out there. Honestly, I don't know the full story of everything. You would have to ask them about it. But what I can tell you about her is that in the bingo book she is called Shouju Hikiho, Scarlet Witch, he said, making her stare at the spelling. Holy shishti, she was barely an A to S rank player in the bingo book, let alone a crazy scythe-wielding warrior. To think that Naruto fell in love with someone like her is absurd, but she didn't appear insane either. In fact, her behavior around Naruto suggested that she was in love, and now that the Clan Restoration Act has been passed, there might be a chance. Tsunade asked with a rare expression of seriousness. Anyway, on to more serious matters. What of Akatsuki? With a sigh, Jiraiya took a seat in front of Tsunade. There are still many members as far as I'm aware of. Kakuzu of the Five Hearts, and his partner Hidan. These two are said to be immortals. Kisame Hoshigaki is still a member, however his partner was Itachi, Now I don't know who may have replaced him. There is also Deidara and Sasori of the Red Sands who are partners. Sadly, that is all I know for now. They have been in hiding all these years until recently, where they have started popping up a lot more frequently. I don't know if this is good or bad, only time will tell. Tsunade nodded in agreement, but she let out a sorrowful sigh. Is Naruto ready for them? Jiraiya laughed. Oh yes, and if not, we're here to help him, which is the true reason you brought him back, wasn't it? Jiraiya asked. Tsunade nodded and sighed. I knew we couldn't reinstate him as a Leaf Shinobi. Well, not right now anyway, but we can hire him for his services, allowing us to help him with his battles. Tsunade was always cunning, so Jiraiya shook his head at her. Why not tell him? Tsunade gave a snort. Jiraiya had to agree with her on that one because Naruto was always the one who put himself first. Yeah, right. He would just say that he didn't need help and that it would be safer for us to not get involved. We all know him too much. I suppose you're right. Then Tsunade produced 2 saucers and a bottle of sake. As she poured the sake onto the saucers, she said, Now, why don't you tell me what the blonde Gaki has been up to? With Kagura and Naruto, since they were running out of time, Kagura was leaning on Naruto and holding his hand as he walked down the main street to the training ground, making everyone around them envious of their possessions. Naruto grinned as he observed Kagura's serene appearance. As she gave him a gentle pat on the chest, he laughed and remarked, You know, for someone who has a high amount of bloodlust in a battle, you sure are a softie. All thanks to you, I've never felt at such peace before. I was always on the run before, having to kill to survive. I just got used to it, and then I received my scythe. It made me become accustomed to killing, and sometime I enjoyed it. She ended her speech with a sadness. She confessed, and Naruto laughed. Sometimes when I use the Kyuubi's chakra, I enjoy killing, although it's when I kill people like bandits, rapists and murderers. You shouldn't feel bad about it. For all you know, someone is alive because of you. Kagura grinned at Naruto's effort to lift his spirits. Thanks Narukoi. What are you going to do about Sasuke? Naruto gave an evil laugh. He will know the truth about everything, his and my heritage included. Of course everyone will know, but I'd prefer it that way. As they neared the training area, Kagura grinned into his arm. You better not lose by underestimating him, or you and my scythe will get very comfortable, she was threatening. At that threat, Naruto laughed uneasily. He smirked and said, You know I won't lose, especially him. I will avenge Itachi. Ground of Training 7. Everybody was aware that a hired mercenary had challenged Sasuke to a duel. While some thought it was amusing that an unidentified mercenary would want to battle the legendary Sasuke Uchiha, the more astute among us wondered who this mercenary was and why he would want to fight Sasuke of all people. Everyone was waiting for the fight between the 2 fighters, including Councilman, Genin, Chunin, Jonin, and even Anbu. What stupidity! Sasuke was waiting in the middle of the field for this unidentified loser who genuinely believed he could defeat him, an Uchiha. Kiba asked the group, So anyone know who challenged Sasuke to a fight? Who knows, all I've heard is that Tsunade-sama had hired some outside help, replied Choji. Sakura's statement, whoever it is, can't beat Sasuke-kun, caused some people to sigh in annoyance. Neji, who was a little taken aback by the power he had sensed earlier, said, I wouldn't be so sure. I was able to pick up some extremely high chakra levels before, much higher than Sasuke-san. Kiba said, Maybe it's Naruto. Hana, his sister, questioned, Why would it be Naruto? He was banished. Sakura sadly recalled the look he gave her and remarked, Well, last week we ran into Naruto when we went to Takigakure. Those who were unaware watched in disbelief. Yugao inquired, You met him? What happened? Well, Kisame was about to get away, who was after Taki's Jinchuriki when wood grew out of the ground restraining him. Apparently Naruto can use Mokuton Jutsu. Then Kisame warned him that Akatsuki would be after him soon. He was able to escape. After that Naruto told Kakashi to tell Tsunade-sama. 1 week, maybe this is what he meant, Ino explained to everyone. Sume inquired, So how strong is he? Ten remarked, We don't know, we didn't see him fight really. Ibiki remarked, So, he's most likely facing Sasuke-him? Anko, who was standing by Kurenai, stated, As long as it's a good match, I don't care. As he read Icha, Kakashi remarked, Sasuke wouldn't lose anyway. Kurenai regarded Kakashi with disdain. She had begun to view him as trash after learning of his neglect of Naruto. Still playing favorites? Kakashi gave a headshake. Nope, but I taught him everything he knows. Who was wearing her Anbu uniform without her mask? Yugao questioned. Oh really? Wasn't he with Orochimaru for 3 years? Kakashi frowned behind his mask as he gazed at her. That's beside the point. Sasuke is probably the strongest person here. Sume snarled. Anyway, when the hell is he getting here? 1010, who was waving a kunai, remarked, well, I doubt we have to wait long. Sasuke was thinking about who he would enjoy fighting and destroying, not listening to anyone else's conversation in order to humiliate him in front of everyone. He fervently hoped it was Naruto. Everyone there was perplexed as to what could have caused Tsunade and Jiraiya to appear on the training field at this moment, as they appeared happier than they had in years. Shikamaru yawned and said, Tsunade-sama, what are we called here for? With a sigh, Ino gave Shikamaru a startling slap on the back of the head. Damn it, Shikamaru. The least you could have seemed interested and not yawn. Then they all heard a man laugh, and it was Tsunade, who was grinning. The voice said, it seems you haven't changed, Ino-chan. Ino turned to look at the blonde hair that was sticking up everywhere. In the hopes that it wasn't a dream, she slowly asked, and Naruto? Nobody could believe how much Naruto had changed from the diminutive, orange-clad knucklehead who used to yell that he was the Hokage when he stepped forward and fully revealed himself. This man appeared to have seen a lot of combat and was composed when Ino finally recovered from her shock. She moved so quickly that the Hiraishin appeared envious, and she ended up giving Naruto such a tight hug that it truly startled everyone. Like everyone else here, Kiba was perplexed and asked, what's Naruto doing back here? Tsunade, who was intrigued by the embrace because it brought the two blondes closer than just friends, stated, we've hired Naruto as a mercenary, or we will after his fight to test his abilities. According to 1010, wait a minute, Naruto is the one meant to fight Sasuke? Naruto, who had just untangled himself from Ino, who was grinning brightly, something no one had seen in years, said, yep, it was the best way to show what I'm capable of. In addition, Ino saw a red-headed woman standing across from Naruto, which made her and many others question her identity. Sasuke sneered and said, so the Dobi returns. Naruto gave him a disinterested look. I could say the same to you. Last I checked, you hated this village. Sasuke grinned. Things changed. After I killed Itachi, I decided to come back here. When he was done, nobody noticed the rage in Naruto's eyes. Well, not except Kagura, who winced, and Jiraiya, who appeared interested in the response. Naruto glared at the young man with black hair and remarked, you know, I can't help but think you have some hidden motive. Certain Uchihas like yourself always were slimy bastards. Sasuke glared back at the blonde and growled, if I were you, I would pay attention to what you say. Either way, we should get this match over and done with. Sasuke stated haughtily upon seeing Naruto once more, HMPH, and here I thought this was going to be a challenge. Naruto laughed. He mockingly remarked, there are things about me that would make you piss yourself, Sasuke-chan. This infuriated Sasuke and made people laugh. Naruto ni-san. He turned to face the group and saw Konohamaru, who was taller than when he had last seen him. If he had to guess, he was around 5 feet 6 inches tall. Hey Konohamaru! Naruto exclaimed, gesturing a bit with some optimism. Naruto asked, did you finish that jutsu? And was pleased when Konohamaru nodded. He smiled and held out his right hand, saying, yep, it wasn't as hard as I first thought it would be. To everyone's surprise, chakra began to gather there as it solidified, eventually forming a Rasengan, before he left it to dissipate. Konohamaru was ecstatic to have his boss instruct him when Naruto said, not bad, maybe when this is all over I'll teach some more. The fact that Naruto had been teaching Konohamaru prior to his exile astounded everyone else. But what was even more shocking was that it was the Rasengan of all things. It was even more astounding to witness how thrilled Konohamaru was to be learning from Naruto. After emerging from his astonishment, Kakashi questioned, so why have we all been called here? Some were confused by Naruto's slight glare as he turned to face Kakashi. After giving Ino, who was standing next to him, a small smile, Naruto said simply, I've been asked by Tsunade to help with Akatsuki and Otogakure. Also there are some people I wanted to see while I'm here. Besides, there are some things you all need to see and hear. Kagura then gave him a good luck kiss, which was a little too intimate for some of the people there, who were curious and angry but shocked when Naruto returned it and walked to the center of the training ground with a silly grin, where Sasuke was standing across from him. Tsunade laughed and took a step forward using Naruto's previous name because his heritage was still unknown. Tsunade asked the two of them, assuming a stance. Okay, Naruto Uzumaki is here so we can gauge his abilities against Sasuke Uchiha to see where he stands in rank. Are you two ready? Yup. HN. Tsunade began the match by yelling, well then, Hajime, and leaping back to join the others. Everyone else was extremely nervous because they knew that this match would not end well, especially since it was between two people who had previously attempted to kill each other. Naruto and Sasuke just stared at each other, not moving an inch as they waited for the other to begin. Sasuke repeated the action by hurling a kunai at Naruto's after Naruto flipped one out and swung it at him, but as soon as the two kunai make contact, Naruto sliced through Sasuke's like a knife slices through butter. Seeing the danger, Sasuke leapt out of the way to avoid being cut through. As he looks at the spot where the kunai struck, he sees that it split a rock in half behind it and cut clean through a tree. Sasuke's wide-eyed reaction as he saw what one kunai could accomplish made Naruto laugh. Naruto posed the rhetorical question, "It's amazing what one can do with futon manipulation, is it not?" With his own onyx-colored eyes fixed on Naruto's, Sasuke demanded, "How the hell did you do that?" At the Uchiha's folly, Naruto shakes his head, "Didn't I just tell you? By adding futon to the kunai I am able to make it so sharp it will cut through anything. That is the greatest advantage of futon chakra. It can cut through anything given the time to train in it," Naruto clarified. On the sidelines Asuma said, "Amazing," upon witnessing this kind of manipulation. Kurenai glanced at her male comrade and asked, "What is it?" Asuma laughed. "Such a mastery over futon is practically unheard of. The only people who I know who can achieve such a level is myself, and maybe Tamari of Suna." Confused, Ino questioned, "What's so difficult about that?" Futon is the most difficult element to master of all of them, given the fact that it is the most dangerous and wild. It has always been difficult for someone to be able to control that and infuse it into a weapon to such a degree that it can slice through anything it comes in contact with. To be able to use nature manipulation such as that, the person must create an invisible extension of chakra that shapes into an edge that functions like the normal blade itself. Everyone's attention was drawn to Kagura's sly remark before they even looked at the match. "You've seen nothing yet." Field of battle. Naruto was taken aback by Sasuke's sudden and amazing speed. As he snarled at him, Sasuke jumped up after him and gave Naruto a powerful combo to the chest, causing him to spit out blood, before swinging his foot down on his stomach and sending him to the ground. As Sasuke descended again, he yelled, "Shishi Renden," and slammed down on Naruto with his foot, causing a huge explosion. On the sidelines looking at the impending crater, Tenten remarked, "Looks like Naruto's not getting up anytime soon." He gestured toward the crater and said, "You think that?" Jiraiya paused with a laugh. Jiraiya questioned, "Will stop Naruto?" While some people appeared depressed as they were reminded of what Naruto had endured, he clarified, "Naruto has been beaten to within an inch of his life before and not passed out. What Sasuke just did was practically tickle him." Tsunade remarked, "Naruto is much stronger than he once was." "How strong?" Neji inquired, intrigued by the blonde's growth. Jiraiya turned to face him and saw that everyone was staring at him. He shocked them all by saying, "Stronger than me. I haven't won a fight with him in over a year now." Since they were aware of Jiraiya's pride in his strength, it was shocking that he would acknowledge that he was likely one of the most powerful shinobi in his own right. Field of battle. Feeling that he had defeated Naruto, Sasuke leapt back and smirked as he gazed at the cloud of dust. "Huh, this is as far as you have come, how pathetic." He tilted his head slightly to see Naruto's face by his, but he was unable to speak because of a stinging pain in his back from being sent sailing across the training ground before crashing into a tree. "Oh, and why do you say that?" said a voice near his ear. When Sasuke turned to look behind him, he saw Naruto's knee bent from the blow the blonde had just delivered. It was incredible that such a close range, hardly their attack could be so strong that it sent him flying across the ground. Slowly, Sasuke got to his feet and wiped the blood from his chin. Naruto laughed as he sneered, "Not bad, Dobi, but you're no match for me." As Sasuke glared at Naruto, he activated his Sharingan, turning his eyes from onyx to crimson red with 3 commas in each eye. "So the Sharingan finally comes out. I was wondering how much you still relied on that," Naruto laughed. This time, Sasuke snarled as he sped through hand seals with the command, "Kaden. Goryuka no Jutsu. Fire release. Great Dragon Fire Technique." A giant fire dragon emerged from Sasuke's mouth, its jaws clenched and snarling down on Naruto as though he were its prey. Naruto yelled, raising his hand in a sign the statement, "Suiden. Suiryuden no Jutsu. Water release. Water Dragon Bullet Technique." Describes how a giant water dragon formed out of thin air and then shot forward, its yellow eyes gleaming as it met the fire dragon in the center, causing a chakra explosion that shook the earth as steam rose from the epicenter where a crater had formed. Before yelling, Naruto began to concentrate chakra in his abdomen when he exclaimed, "Futon. Renkuden. Wind release. Drilling air bullet." A massive air bullet blasted out of his mouth and flew straight at Sasuke, knocking away any remaining steam. When Sasuke saw the attack coming, he leapt aside to let the bullet pass by, blowing numerous trees away as it struck the forest, leaving everyone in awe of the destruction. The ground had been torn apart, and more than a dozen trees had been blown away. Sasuke called forth his next jutsu, opened his mouth, and leapt high into the air as the black-haired boy exclaimed, "Raiden! Gion! Lightning release! False darkness!" A bolt of lightning was conjured from his mouth and flew across the ground, tearing it apart as it approached Naruto, who was standing composedly. Naruto glanced at Sasuke, who was motionless. Before turning back to face the lightning as it approached, he leapt to his feet, said, and extended his hands to Sasuke. An enormous whirlwind called Futon. Kami Oroshi. Wind release. Godly wind from the mountain. Blasted out of Naruto's hands and struck Sasuke squarely, sending him flying into the forest and tumbling before he stopped at a tree. Upon witnessing his jutsu feat, Naruto collapsed once more, poised for a counterattack. What was that jutsu, Shishti? As he hefted a tree off of himself, Sasuke pondered. On the sidelines as he munched on his chips, Choji remarked, "Ouch, that looked like it hurt." At his neglected former pupil, Kakashi muttered in surprise, to think that Naruto could perform such jutsu with only one hand seal. "What about it?" Lee asked, referring to the fact that he is unable to use most jutsu. Asuma explained it rather than Kakashi. The Suiryuden no Jutsu is normally a jutsu that requires a total of 44 hand seals for it to be used at its full potential while needing a source of water. What Naruto just did hadn't been seen since the Nidaime Hokage. He used the water molecules in the air to form the dragon while only using a single hand seal. If I didn't know any better, I would say he has mastered his elements to such a degree that it makes it possible for him to use almost any jutsu. Asuma laughed at the sight of Naruto growing so adept at it. Kiba whispered, "Whoa!" At Naruto's strength, Kakashi was astounded by the blonde's progress and questioned, just how the hell did he get so strong? Simply put, Jiraiya said, "Kage Bunshin." "Kage Bunshin?" a bewildered Hinata inquired. Kage Bunshin has an amazing ability that can be a great advantage to anyone with high chakra levels like Naruto. Once a Kage Bunshin dispels, it transfers all knowledge it had received back to the original user. Kakashi jumped right into the idea by asking, "So you're saying that if Naruto had one clone dispelled, it would increase his training twice as fast?" "Exactly." Jiraiya cried. Shino inquired, "How many clones can Naruto-san make?" Jiraiya casually remarked, about 1,000 if he wanted." This number left everyone speechless. Anko began, "But if that's the case, then," Kurenai concluded for her friend, "then Naruto could get lifetimes worth of training fitted in." Field of battle. Naruto heard a shout just as he was ready to pursue Sasuke. He looked up and saw a spear of lightning coming directly at him. Thinking quickly, he unsheathed Hiranmaru, put it in front of him, and uttered the words, "Chidori Iso. 1,000 birds sharp spear. Heen. Flying swallow." The wind suddenly whirled around the blade, encircling it in a tiny vortex that stretched the blade's length. Then, while shouting, Naruto swung the sword while holding it horizontally. Futon. Yuha Sho. Wind release. Beastwave palm. As the lightning spear was cut in half, a tremendous wave of wind blasted out from the blade, traveling directly toward it and dissolving it into nothing. But the wind didn't stop there. It continued into the forest and began to chop down trees. A sword flew over his head, chopping off a few stray hairs as he fell into a crouch. Sensing danger from the right, Sasuke was still swinging his Chikuto when Naruto looked up. With the Sharingan, Sasuke was able to see the movement and flip back, avoiding the sweep by millimeters. Naruto saw the opportunity and swung his legs in an arc, hoping to catch Sasuke's feet. Naruto was now fully upright when Sasuke extended his sword to him. Kusanagi no Tsurugi. Chidori Katana. Kusanagi sword. 1,000 birds katana. As he raised his sword high, Raiden Chakra abruptly swooped down the blade, engulfing it entirely and sending sparks flying off it. With his sword raised, Naruto lunged at Sasuke. As he leapt into the air, Sasuke saw the attack and swung his sword at Naruto's stomach, recognizing its vulnerability, until Naruto abruptly disappeared from view, shocking him. Then, with his sword still raised, Naruto materialized on Sasuke's left side as he swung down. Sasuke used his speed and the Sharingan's detection to spin around in time, blocking his opponent with a horizontal blade. From the chakra output of the two weapons, Naruto had applied enough force to the attack as the blades collided to form a crater beneath Sasuke. Naruto was knocked away by Sasuke's sword swing, and he flipped in midair before crouching down. Sasuke eyed Naruto and grinned a haughty, "Is that all you got?" he asked. "I have to give it to the Dobi. He's good. I didn't realize he could control Futon so well." Naruto grinned as he looked up, Not a chance, as he considered, I'll give him credit for his sword skills, but with Hiranmaru's abilities, it shouldn't be an issue. Naruto straightened up before assuming a stance and taking off, almost running along the ground while kicking up dust. He stabbed forward as he approached Sasuke. But Sasuke sidestepped the blow. Letting the blade go by his side, Sasuke then grabbed the wrist holding Hiranmaru before swinging his foot toward his head. When Naruto saw the foot approaching, he realized he wouldn't be able to defend himself, so he did the best he could by flipping Sasuke's arm over and twisting his wrist slightly before swinging his foot toward his face, which would undoubtedly hit. Sasuke was impressed by Naruto's ability to escape the attack, but he didn't anticipate the roles being switched. Seeing no other option, he used his chakra system to channel Raiden before yelling, Chidori Nagashi. 1000 birds current. Sasuke was encircled by lightning, which then attacked Naruto, blowing him away from the defensive jutsu's force. As he was blown away, Naruto felt the tiny shocks that went through his body, causing his fingers to twitch and messing with his nervous system. He began to tumble as he hit the ground, but he put the palms of his hands on the ground and flipped himself up into a crouch, keeping his head down to catch his breath and straighten his body. As his jutsu faded, Sasuke smirked and turned to face Naruto. Give up, Dobi. You should know by now that you can never beat Uchiha. You have to be a Uchiha to beat me. Naruto began to laugh before it became full-fledged laughter, much to the surprise of everyone but the Sannin, who knew what was going to happen. Naruto raised his head and closed his eyes, saying, I have to be a Uchiha, do I? In order to defeat you. He opened his eyes and said, then I don't think I'll have a problem. To everyone's surprise, especially Sasuke's, he saw a fully grown-up Sharingan in both of the blonde's eyes. On the sidelines, holy shit, Kiba cried, taken aback by the small incident. Sakura couldn't think of anything more to say, so she asked, how? Jiraiya laughed at Naruto's display of ancestry. Naruto's a Uchiha, simple as that. Hinata questioned, but why wasn't anyone ever told? Only me. Jiraiya and the elders knew who Naruto's father was. We didn't know who the mother was, as his father wouldn't tell us. We only knew he had the Sharingan for a few years now. Ino, who was unaware of all of this, exclaimed excitedly, be quiet, I think he's going to tell us. Field of battle. As his own Sharingan eyes gazed in confusion into the blonde's, Sasuke's eyes widened. Sasuke, bewildered, said, how the hell do you have the Sharingan? Naruto got up, stabbed Hiranmaru into the ground, and then leaned on it, declaring, I'm a Uchiha. I found out a couple days after I was banished. I had been on my way to Wave Country when I was attacked by bandits. Now usually it would have been easier to kill them, but I was starved and had nothing to drink for days. At some point during the fight a bandit was ready to cleave me in two when everything slowed down to the point that it was like time stopped. Using it to my advantage I killed them using what was left of my strength. Later on I had found a lake where I checked myself in, and to my shock I found the Sharingan staring back at me. At first I was happy. It meant I had a family. I knew where I was from and that I belonged to a clan. Then I realized they were all dead. I would never meet my parents no matter how much I wished I could. With interest, Sasuke inquired, who were your parents? Naruto sighed and continued, saying, I'm getting there, there's more first. Now that I had the Sharingan I was able to learn so much easier, able to understand so many things, and luckily it helped me with my knowledge. Towards the end of the first year of my banishment I ended up in Kumogakure, where I started to train in my Raiden Jutsu, and luckily enough for me I found a couple fellow Jinchuriki that helped me in my training as well. That's how it went for the next couple years. Not stop training all over the elemental countries for a couple years. I even trained at Mount Myobokuzen where I learned much. Then it came down to the end of the 4th year where I met my last sensei, Itachi Uchiha. Sasuke started to say, what? Itachi was your sensei? Are you insane? He killed RCL, but was stopped when he was hit in the face with a fist, which caused him to skid back. The fact that Naruto was taught by Itachi astounded everyone, but when he punched Sasuke for insulting Itachi, it confused everyone. Naruto said angrily, I don't know where I'd be right now if it weren't for Itachi. Before he calmed down the elders began to perspire as Naruto looked at them, something Tsunade and Jiraiya noticed and found confusing. Anyway, when I first met him I was going to fight him until I noticed he wasn't wearing the Akatsuki cloak. When I asked him what he wanted, he simply told me he wanted to teach me and that I deserved to know the truth about everything. Itachi decided to tell me who my parents were. My father was one of the greatest shinobi ever to exist, Namikaze Minato aka the Yondaime Hokage. To be honest, at first I was pissed. The guy who had cursed me to live a life of hell was my father. Then I had to understand that he'd done it because he couldn't ask someone else's family to do it. What he didn't count on was this village stabbing him in the back and fucking his last wish and doing as they please like the scum there. He stated with such distaste that those who treated him bad flinched terribly. especially now they knew who his dad was. Irony seemed to be affecting everyone today, as Naruto's friends were still in disbelief over the boy's ancestry and couldn't believe the Dobi was a Uchiha and the son of the Yondaime Hokage. Then came my mother. I truly wish I could meet her. I knew I would love her dearly. When I was a baby she had to give me up for my own protection for the Uchiha clan. My mother was called Uchiha, Makoto. Sasuke staggered back in disbelief. Was Naruto his brother? Had he attempted to murder his own brother all this time? How mentally unstable was he? When I was told the truth, I was pissed, not at Itachi or my parents, but the Sandaime, the man I thought of as a grandfather, and for years he lied to me straight to my face. I had begged and pleaded with the man, but all he said was that he found me in the forest after the Kyuubi attack, no sign of parents whatsoever, leading me to believe I had been abandoned by them. It didn't help when I found out I had the Kyuubi sealed in me. I had thought it all made sense, so why would any parent want a demon for their child? If the Sandaime had been alive when I found out, I would have made what Orochimaru did look like child's play. He spoke with such rage that everyone fled, especially the two Sannin, who were relieved that the Sandaime was already dead because they knew Naruto would have unleashed Kyuubi if he truly wanted to. Does all this mean we're brothers? And what do you mean protect you from the clan? He confused Sasuke by saying, no, we're not brothers, we're cousins. My mother only had two sons, me and Itachi. Itachi was my brother. On the sidelines, oh my god, Kurenai exclaimed, stunned to learn that Naruto's brother was Itachi. Kakashi, who was also taken aback by the disclosure, remarked, I had no idea. As he looked at the ground for not being there for Naruto, Jiraiya remarked, I only knew the father. Minato was very secretive. Minato had said he was having a son, but he never mentioned who the mother was. He said something about doing it to protect her, and it all makes sense now. Standing beside Hinata with Hanabi, Hiyashi shook his head at the elder's stupidity and remarked, to think Naruto has such a legacy, and yet this village had thrown him away. Yep, you people really fucked up, Kagura sighed sorrowfully. Field of battle, his eyes were downcast, and he asked, but, who are my parents? Knowing what it must be like to discover that your entire life has been a lie, Naruto gazed at him with sadness. Your mother was Uchiha Hitomi, she was my mother's sister, and your father was Uchiha Shinji. Your parents died fighting the Kyuubi. My mother, knowing you would be an orphan, decided to have you be adopted into the family. Sasuke seemed to realize something as he looked up. That was why my Fugaku always looked down on me and paid attention to Itachi, his real son. But what did you mean keep you safe? Yes, and what I meant by keeping me safe from the Uchiha clan was that if people found out my mother had an affair with the Yondaime, it would cause disaster for everyone. My mother was only married to Fugaku out of some political marriage. Itachi was the end result of that. If the Uchihas found out about me, they would have had me killed along with my mother for the betrayal. Given the fact I had the Kyuubi, they may have done something worse than kill me. My mother did the next best thing considering she couldn't protect me herself, so she had Itachi do it as a mission. He was my guard for years, where we became like brothers, only I didn't know just how much like brothers we were at the time. But Itachi killed all of the clan. I don't understand. He looked at the elders and said, yes he did, but he had no choice in the matter. He had to concede that they had balls for simply standing there in defiance. For years the Uchiha clan had been prosecuted for the Kyuubi attack, which caused Fugaku to become angered and wanting more power. He had made plans to take over the village by making a revolt against the Sandaime. Itachi had been playing a double agent for the Uchiha and Hokage the entire time. It eventually came down to the point where the Hokage and elders had to order Itachi to wipe out the Uchiha clan. Itachi had agreed, if my mother and you would live. Apparently he wanted the three of us to be able to be a family, but that went to shit on the same night when Itachi had finally gotten to Fugaku. He had found the bastard with his sword driven through my mother, killing her because she was against the plan, so Itachi killed him with happiness. At that point you had shown up and you know the rest. Sasuke stood there taking in everything his cousin had told him. He grinned a little at the thought of having some family left, but that smile only lasted until Naruto's next statement. With hatred in his voice, Naruto remarked, and then you killed my brother. Sasuke recoiled in disbelief. On the sidelines everyone was surprised when Kakashi swore, oh shit, because he never swears. Sakura inquired, what is it Kakashi-sensei? Guy guessed, Naruto is going to kill Sasuke. What? How come he would do that? Confused, Ino asked. Shikamaru exclaimed with a sigh, troublesome, it's obvious, Naruto and Itachi were brothers, not Sasuke and Itachi, and you all know what happened when Sasuke and Itachi fought. Yes, Itachi was killed by Sasuke. Oh, Kiba said, realizing his destination. Kurenai looked down sorrowfully and remarked, Sasuke killed Naruto's only remaining family, something he had always wanted. Neji agreed, saying, yes, we might need to step in. With a laugh, Jiraiya remarked, good luck with that. What are you saying? Hinata inquired. He looked away as Tsunade laughed, saying, for all I care Sasuke deserves to die, if you expect me to jump in and save him, forget it. She snickered as Jiraiya complained, then turned back to the match and saw Naruto's hateful eyes, which made her sigh with sorrow. You're just afraid of Naruto because he can beat you. During the conversation, Kagura was genuinely concerned about whether Naruto would kill Sasuke. To be honest, she didn't care. She would only step in if Naruto was going to die, and given his strength, that wouldn't happen. Field of battle. What? Sasuke exclaimed in surprise. Don't you remember, you killed Itachi, my brother, because he killed the clan which got what it deserved. Now, Naruto said with a dark laugh as he picked Hiranmaru up off the ground. He paused as he raised his sword, holding it vertically to his chest, as energy chakra began to swirl around him. It's my turn to be the Avenger. As the power increased, he yelled. When Sasuke realized what Naruto meant, his eyes widened in shock. He was going to exact revenge for removing his only family. Hiranmaru, Soden ni Zace. To everyone's surprise, Hiranmaru grew slightly longer and acquired a crescent-shaped blade that was fastened to its hilt by a long metal chain. Sit upon the frozen heavens, Hiranmaru. As soon as he finished speaking, a huge spike of chakra exploded outwards, causing ice to spike out of the ground and clouds to gather above him from the power's output. Although Ten appeared ready for an orgasm from the sword's display, everyone could sense the sword's power and was taken aback by it. It was also well known that she had a fetish for swords. Did you know, Sasuke, that the elders in this village would put their own needs ahead of everyone else's, which is why I was exiled? They were terrified of Akatsuki. Then everyone realized how corrupt the council had been. And now they need me back because Akatsuki are after them anyway, he said, turning to face the elders who were looking away in shame. If it wasn't for people like Tsunade and Jiraiya, I would have never come back and I'd had let the village burn. I have no love here anymore, he said, shocking everyone once more. The clan heads had realized how much they had messed up in the village, constantly turning the Uchiha family into an enemy and now the son of the Yondaime. Are you really going to allow this village to be destroyed? As the blonde-haired man held his now transformed blade in a stance, Sasuke asked in surprise. Why not? This village has deprived me of everything. What has it ever done for me? He brought Hiranmaru in a reverse grip with the blade facing backwards and focused chakra in the blade, saying, Karma is a bitch, you know how it is, treat me as if I were the Kyuubi. On the sidelines, he would genuinely permit our murder? Startled, Hinata inquired. Naruto-kun wouldn't let that happen, Ino said, shaking her head. He said the village, not its people. But is it really possible to blame him? I guess your logic is correct. Shino replied passively. This village has caused Naruto-san's life to be hell, far worse than any of us could ever understand. Kiba's mother, Sume, who was waiting with the other clan heads, remarked, I'm surprised the pup hasn't snapped yet. Tsunade smiled at Naruto, who appeared to be a god with his Sharingan active and his sword ejecting power, causing his coat and hair to blow in the wind. He has the will of fire. It's just a shame this village is so simple-minded. Field of battle. A wave of ice shoots out from the tip of the sword as it swings forward in an arc, traveling quickly along the ground at Sasuke. Sasuke was shocked to see the attack and yelled, Kaden. Karyu Enden. While he was doing hand seals. Fire release. Fire Dragon Flame Missile. Unlike in his battle with Haku, who used ice, a tremendous amount of fire was blasted out of Sasuke's mouth like a flamethrower that batted against the approaching ice. The fire was so concentrated that it was felt by those on the sidelines. Eventually, the fire subsided as the ice stopped where it was, but to his surprise, it didn't melt much. At the shocked expressions on people's faces, Naruto grinned and said, like it? He is Hiranmaru. This sword is literally a part of my soul, and it contains an ice dragon that enables me to use it to defeat my adversaries. Even more incredible is the fact that, in this form, I can control Suiden and Hyuden whenever I want from the sword's base. I honestly don't know where I would be without him. Because the weapon contains an ice dragon that is a part of Naruto's soul, everyone stared at it in wonder. Sasuke gasped when he heard that it would be a tough match because he is a Kaden and Raiden, but he also possesses the Mangekyo Sharingan, which he didn't think Naruto possessed. Even though Naruto wanted him dead, Sasuke smirked and jumped up, putting his hand to his mouth and shouting, Kaden. Goryuka no Jutsu. Fire release. Great Dragon Fire Technique. The raven-haired boy's mouth exploded with a huge dragon that swung at Naruto, who leapt to his feet and swung Hiranmaru forward. A bright blue ice dragon emerged from the tip of the blade before it sped in the direction of the fire dragon. When the two dragons made contact, the training ground was covered in a huge explosion of dust, fire, and ice. Water. The spectators had to cover their eyes with their arms and apply chakra to their feet to stay in place because of the explosion's effects. They were able to observe a sizable crater created by the airborne attacks as the dust settled. The fact that ice had formed around the crater, which was slightly scorched, was evidence of how dangerous those two attacks were. On the sidelines, this is getting out of control, isn't it? Sakura expressed her fear for both her current and former teammates. Yawning, Shikamaru remarked, "They need this." "What does that mean?" Ten inquired. "This is Naruto's method of demonstrating his own worth and that he is no longer a dead last," Jiraiya clarified, "and because Naruto is a Uchiha, Sasuke will fight harder, which is what Naruto wants." Many questioned whether Sakura was truly the most intelligent kunoichi after she said, "I don't understand." The entire time, Sasuke underestimated Naruto because he believed he was only a commoner. He will take it more seriously now that he is aware of both his own and Naruto's ancestry. Will they not murder one another? As he watched the devastation caused by the two attacks, Lee inquired. Naruto wants to kill Sasuke for revenge, for taking his only family away from him, something he had never had before, Tsunade responded. Should we prepare to step in? Who else knew this wasn't going to be pretty? Shikaku asked. Everyone appeared to understand as they turned back to the Uchihas, but Tsunade simply shook her head and said, "No, I don't think Naruto will kill him. I think he wants Sasuke to know he can kill him," a sort of warning. Field of battle. Sasuke and Naruto both lowered themselves gently to the ground, and as soon as they touched it, both Uchiha leapt forward, their swords in front of them, ready to strike. Both Sharingans were whirling wildly, assessing each other's strength and speed, and attempting to guess where they would strike. However, because they were equal, it was already difficult for them to follow each other. As before, the two swords clashed once more, but this time, the raiden that had flown down Sasuke's katana was severed when ice moved across the blade where Hiranmaru had struck. Sasuke was so shocked that he flipped out of his way and kicked Naruto in the stomach, causing the blonde to stagger back. As he channeled Kaden chakra onto his sword, Naruto grinned and said, "As you can see, Hiranmaru freezes everything it touches." The ice had formed along the sword. "So that's your element?" sneered Sasuke, looking up. Hayatan? "Nope, I have all of the elements at my disposal. A gift Kyuubi, you might say," Naruto said, shaking his head. "In addition to a few of my own." "Really?" Sasuke questioned mockingly, not trusting the blonde who arched an eyebrow. Sheathing Hiranmaru, which returned to its sealed state, he ran through hand seals before coming to a halt. "Very well, I'll prove it to you then. Mokiden. Daijiren no Jutsu." To everyone's surprise, when Naruto jerked his arm forward, it changed into a giant tree that moved along the ground, occasionally stabbing it. Wood release. Great forest technique. In a display of strength, Sasuke, who had just recovered from his shock, leapt over the enormous tree and it crashed down where he was standing, scattering a lot of dust. As he fell again and landed on the wood that had embedded itself in the ground, Sasuke looked down and said, "More as a statement, so you can combine elements to make the sub-elements." As he began creating more hand seals, Naruto laughed and said, "I told you, didn't I?" "But you wouldn't listen." He yelled, "Shoten! Shuriken Ranbu!" As he landed on the final seal, crystal release, Shuriken Wild Dance. Holding both hands out, crystal started forming around him in the shape of dozens of shurikens before launching at Sasuke, who gathered Raiden in his left hand before he swung it in an arc. Chidori Senbon. Senbon, or lightning, erupted from his hand and struck each crystal shuriken. 1,000 birds Senbon. Precisely. They didn't stop there, though, as they continued to cut through them and reach Naruto. Seeing the danger, Naruto sealed his hands and yelled, "Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." Knowing how unpredictable Naruto was, Sasuke became uneasy when 60 clones poofed into existence in front of him. Blocking all of the Senbon attacks, only 4 clones remained. Standing a good distance apart, this was done using the multiple shadow clone technique. Before they occupied a sizable area, all 4 clones simultaneously yelled, "Kaden! Kanhekigon no Jutsu!" As they held out their hands where a ball of flames appeared and gradually grew in size, all of the clones thrust their hands forward, launching the 4 balls at Sasuke, whose eyes widened in surprise at the jutsu. Fire release. Flame burst sphere. The real Naruto shouted out his jutsu as the fireballs were launched forward, breaking through his own hand seals as the balls grew larger. Futon. Atsugai, pressure damage. Wind release. The 4 fireballs were further fused into a raging inferno that scorched the ground and set nearby trees on fire when Naruto blew out a huge tornado at them. Naruto heard Sasuke exclaim as the flames drew closer. Amaterasu. Illuminating heaven. To the surprise of all, black flames attacked the fire, battling it until it ultimately defeated the red flames and extinguished them, with the black flames subsequently disappearing. Naruto noticed that Sasuke's eyes had changed into 3 intersecting ellipses that resembled a red flower with 6 petals on a black background. So you've gained Mangekyo Sharingan him? Amused, Naruto asked. With a dark chuckle, Sasuke said, of course I did. I gained it when I killed Itachi. Naruto frowned, making everyone uneasy because they knew it wasn't the right thing to say. Is that correct? So how about I show mine to you? Everyone was completely taken aback by the new appearance when he asked rhetorically while closing his eyes and opening them to reveal a 3-sided pinwheel with a ring that had 3 circular holes in it. What is that? Sasuke inquired, perplexed by Naruto's eyes appearing to have 2 designs. This is the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. It's what someone attains when they take their siblings' eyes as long as the 2 have gained the Mangekyo Sharingan. How, but what? Sasuke said, startled and perplexed. Itachi had his eyes. You are mistaken. Those were our mother's eyes, not his. After putting me through a lot of training when I first met him, he eventually sent me to Tsukuyomi to see my mother die, which made me feel sad and angry and awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. We discovered that it shared some of Itachi's skills, but my design was a ring with 3 round holes. I spent so much time training in them that I almost went blind. Itachi was able to fix that and instructed me to take his eyes. Although I initially objected, he nearly coerced me into having them implanted in my eyes. Combining our 2 abilities to create something neither of us could have predicted gave me incredible strength. Itachi told me that he had our mother's eyes, which she had pleaded with him to keep for the future after she had acquired the Mangekyo Sharingan from Fugaku's betrayal. It must have been inherited or something because they surprisingly possessed the same skills as his old eyes, he remarked, his eyes appearing to glow. They are what Itachi fought with, and now I can have my revenge with both mine and Itachi's eyes. What made Itachi give his eyes to you? Sasuke frowned as he asked. He wanted me to carry on the Uchiha clan, to become a real clan, not one full of arrogant assholes like the old one, and I will actually restart the clan how it is meant to be, unlike someone, Naruto said, glaring at Sasuke as though he were a fool. How's your whole build my clan plan going on anyway? Are you still avoiding all the women who are pursuing you? Why would I want a weak woman to restart my clan with? Sneered Sasuke, though it wasn't really a question, he asked angrily. Naruto shook his head in dismay and laughed at him, asking, what makes a person strong? Is it the strength of their bodies? Mental fortitude? What is your book's strength? How would you know? Sasuke gave him a growl. I know that whoever rebuilds my clan with me will do so out of love, not power or a tool like you want, Naruto said with a sly smile. Like I said, you just like the other Uchihas, the ones who got themselves killed, he joked, drawing laughter from the audience and a snarl from Sasuke. I already have women who want to be my wives, whereas the closest thing you will get to any sort of sexual relationship is Orochimaru, or has that already happened? Sasuke grinned ominously. Like Itachi and your mother? He posed a rhetorical question. Naruto's eyes seemed to glow eerily after that, and Sasuke kind of regretted what he had said. Too bad it was too late. On the sidelines Tsunade began, receiving nods from everyone. When I said Naruto will not kill Sasuke, just make him know he can. Forget that. Naruto is going to kill him, she concluded, drawing wide-eyed stares from everyone. Kagura said with a somber laugh, oh yeah, he's a goner. Why? Sakura made a dumb question. Ino gave her a dumbfounded look and said, are you dumb? Naruto's brother. The brother Sasuke killed. And mother were just insulted by Sasuke. Many were shocked by her statement because they knew they were like sisters. Get your head out of Sasuke's ass and actually think about other people. What? Why do you stand up for Naruto? Sakura inquired in shock. Kagura grinned even more when Ino smirked and said, I love him. It was the one thing that almost made them faint. On the sidelines, you are a bastard, I'll murder you, he shouted, Amaterasu. As he opened his eyes wide, more black flames than Sasuke had used shot out towards him in illuminating heaven, and Sasuke's eyes widened in shock as Naruto didn't even look at him, indicating that the attack bothered him a little. Seeing the threat, Sasuke knew he had to strike back. The only issue was that, in contrast to Naruto, Sasuke's vision deteriorated. Amaterasu. As they began to battle for supremacy, Sasuke's own black flames attacked Naruto's, and the onlookers couldn't help but feel a little alarmed as the flames grew larger in an attempt to overwhelm the other. They noticed that Sasuke's eyes were beginning to bleed, and when they looked at Naruto, he didn't even have a drop of perspiration streaming down his face. Instead, he maintained a focused expression. A huge burst of chakra erupted from Sasuke just as the black flames were about to overwhelm him, throwing the flames back in the ground beneath him out of everyone's line of sight. "You'll lose now, Dobi. You should have learned you could never beat me," said Sasuke as the dust settled, revealing him encircled by a large spectral figure with an arrow in its right hand and a bow that doubled as a shield on its left forearm. With the crossbow on its left forearm pointing at him and an excessively large ethereal arrow in its loading spot ready to fire, Naruto gazed at the ethereal figure that towered over everything in the shape of a knight, encircling Sasuke. "You think your Susanoo can defeat me? However, I must admit that while I'm impressed, activating it is not at all simple. Would you mind using your Susanoo?" With the ethereal figure surrounding him shimmering, Sasuke asked. "Why do you think I possess it at all?" Naruto raised an eyebrow in question. "Well, it's clear that you would have the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan because you were trained by Itachi, so show it off." As he flew through hand seals, Naruto laughed and looked at Sasuke with amusement. "I don't need that to defeat you, I have my own way." Shoten. Hachi no Jin Suishiheki. Crystal release. 8th formation of the Jade Crystal Wall. Before anything else could be done, a crack appeared in the crystal, and an enormous ethereal arrow was blasted through it, striking the shocked Naruto in the chest and sending him flying back, pinning him to a tree, and making him go limp suddenly. The entire area around Sasuke was encased in a massive prison of crystal, preventing him from moving at all. Naruto-kun.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.